that you know how to use the more or less right formula in a theoretical situation, let's apply it to a practical situation, which is, in this case, on our pattern, how to get our sleeves into the armhole edge. If you've been with me for any time at all, you know that I really emphasize that rows are shorter than they are wide, that stockinette stitches are rectangles. And that means that we have more rows into which to fit fewer stitches. We have to fit 45 stitches, in my case, into 62 rows, which means when I'm picking up along that edge, I've got to skip a certain number of stitches. I, in fact, have to skip, let's see what that is, 62, because I have 31 rows in the front, 31 rows on the back, so 62 minus my 45 stitches, I have 17 stitches. I have 17 stitches that I have to skip along here as I'm picking up, and actually I'm coming from the back and over. Okay, to pick up my 45. Now, what does that look like when I do my math? And I usually do it right on here so that I know which ones I have to skip, but for right now I'm going to do it on this larger paper so that you can see it more easily. Okay, I have, currently I have 62 because I have these 62 rows. Those are the ones I'm going to be working with. So here's my 62, and I need to skip 17 of them. That's the number I want to reduce or increase by. This is the number I have now. So 17 goes into 62 3 times. 3 times 7 is 21. Yep, this is right, 51. I have a remainder of 11. 17 minus 11 gives me 6. And 3 plus 1, and I'm doing it mentally this time, gives me 4. And you'll get to the point where you don't have to have the little extra plus and minus things. What this tells me is that I have to skip every third stitch 6 times as I'm picking up, and skip every fourth stitch 11 times. Now this is almost twice as often that I have to go 1, 2, 3, skip the fourth, 1, 2, 3, skip the fourth. This is 1, 2, skip the third. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, skip the fourth, 1, 2, 3, skip the fourth, 1, 2, skip the third. I'm going to mix these 6s in among this 11. This is almost twice as much. And I'll keep track of them, so I will make little hash marks as I'm doing it. If you're really needing more help than that, you can actually write the third stitch, the four, you know, skip the fourth stitch, the 8th stitch, the 11th stitch. You can write all those numbers down, and that will help you. Now, once I get that picked up, and I'll show you how to do it, the next thing that we have to do is start knitting down on our sleeve. And in my case, this is those short little arms, those little 1-year-olds. I have to go from 45 stitches down to 29 stitches over 34 rows. So I have to decrease along these edges in order to get that few. So I need to know how often I should decrease. This is another place where you use the more or less formula. So I am starting with 45 stitches, and I have to get down to 29, 16. Okay, so I have to reduce 16 stitches from there to there. I have 34 rows to do it in, but do I have 16 decrease rows? No. I only have 8 decrease rows because I'm going to decrease 8 on this side and 8 on that side, and that will give me my 16. So I only need to reduce by 8 rows. Make sure that this is in the picture here. By 8, well, let's get a bigger place. So I only have to reduce on 8 rows out of 34, except I don't really like to decrease on the very last row, so I'm going to back it up. I'm going to leave 2 rows plain there, So really it's over 32, which is very fortuitous because look, 8 goes into 32. This is a very rare occurrence, but it goes evenly. It goes 4 times. 4 times 8 is 32, and I have a remainder of 0. So if I don't have to go through the rest of the process. I just need 8 minus 0 is 8. There's nothing to go with the 0 times, so I have to decrease every 4th row 8 times. And I'll show you what I do on my pattern, because it's usually, first of all, not this regular. And second of all, even if it is this regular, I just like to keep myself from nodding off, and I want to check that. So I'm going to decrease as I'm going down, because we're knitting the sleeves from the top down. And on row 4, every 4th row, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32. That gives me, I still have 2 rows at the bottom that are plain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 decrease rows. Great. So that was an easy one to figure out, all because of the more or less right formula. So let's go ahead and pick up those stitches, or I'll show you how to pick up those stitches on the armhole edge and start knitting your sleeve down. You'll remember that I had you mark your underarm on both the back and the front by knitting a piece of contrasting color thread in with your knitting yarn at that point. In my case, I knit the 34 rows that I needed for the body, and then the very first row of the underarm, which was the 35th row, or the beginning of my 31 rows, I used the thread. And if you didn't do that, it's okay. I'll show you what mine looks like, so it marks it pretty easily for me. This is the row. Even though it didn't catch very well, this is that row, and there's the end stitch of it. If you didn't mark it, I suggest that you go ahead and count your rows and just stick a safety pin in there, just like this. It's just as good. And so I have mine marked 2 ways now. You're going to pick up these stitches with the needle that you knitted the sweater with. Remember, don't use just some small one. And you're going to pick up right between the last 2 stitches on your knitting, right at the very edge. Here's the edge stitch, and there's the stitch between it. So you're picking up essentially 2 loops, the whole last stitch when you do this. So here's my first row. Take your regular yarn, just let it flop, and just stick it in there and knit it off. And I'm going, and see, there's the next little hole. Can you see? Let me move this out of the way. Maybe the contrast will be a little better. See that hole right there? So 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to skip the 4th stitch. And there it is. There's the 4th one, and so I'm just going to go to the next one. 1, 2, 3. Once you're in that channel, once you're in that groove, go ahead and look back, and you can see that exactly where that line is formed. I'm going to skip the 4th, and then I'm just going to do 1, 2, and skip the 3rd. And that's pretty much my pattern all the way across. 1, 2, and I have to compensate with just 1 extra one. But when I'm done, I will count and make sure that I have 45 stitches, and then I will be ready to start working and stockinette on the way down. I will decrease, and it doesn't matter what kind of decreases you use. Just make sure that they're mirrored images. And for this case, I would not put the decreases right at the edge, because we're putting these into a seam. These ones we were picking up and knitting over here on the neck edge, but when I have a seam, I prefer to move the decreases in by 1 stitch. So leave the end stitch plain, do the decreases on stitches number 2 and 3 at both sides. You may have those decreases lean in the direction of the slant or lean against it. And in fact, for this sweater, it might be a good experiment to make one sleeve one way and the other sleeve the other way. That way you'd have a nice little comparison. On your right sleeve, for example, you make the decreases move in the direction of the slant, and on the left sleeve make them move opposite the slant, which means they'll look a little more up and down. And this, believe me, that I have not met a single 1-year-old or even 2-year-old who gives a whole piece of sweet potato about whether or not they go one direction or the other, or they don't match from one arm to the other. And remember, this is a kind of a student sampler, so this might be your opportunity to play with that. When you get down to the cuff, don't bother to decrease at all. We're just going to keep the same number of stitches in the cuff as we have at the bottom of the sleeve, but do switch down to your smaller needle, whether it's 1 or 2 sizes smaller, and work the same number of rows that you had in the rib over here, and bind off loosely in rib. And when you get there, rejoin me and we're going to sew this little thing together.